Sotah Daf test briefly discusses Machlokes Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva. Then it gets into the concept of Ein Boi Das Lishol as far as it applies to the halachos of Safek Tumah V'Tara. Then it will get much deeper into the sugya of Tumah Tahara Kli Rishon, Sheni, Shlishi, even Revi, L'Tumah, which was mentioned in our last Mishnah, and give a number of limudim as far as that. So let's begin. The Gemara has recently quoted a conversation between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Akiva had said that there are three things that is also for a Sotah. She's also to her husband, she's also to the Boel, and she's also for Truma. And he learned that of the three times it says Nitma in the Psukim. And Rabbi Shmuel ostensibly argued, and he said, no, the fact that she's also to Kahuna, to marry a Kohen, is learned from a Kal V'chomer, not from any of those psukim that you said. So the Gemara has two obvious kashas. The Gemara first of all asks what Rabbi Shmuel sounds like he's arguing on Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva didn't say anything about the Isser to marry Kahuna. He was just talking about Baal, Bol, and Truma. And second of all, where does Rabbi Akiva indeed get the halacha of Isser Kahuna? Apparently, he's supposed to be arguing on Rabbi Shmuel. So what is his limud? So the Gemara answers. It has, first of all, it has an attempted answer. Maybe to answer the second kasha, Rabbi Akiva holds you don't need a pasuk for kahuna because the concept of Sotah is that she's treated like a vadai. She's usher as a vadai, even though she's only a suffix, because before she drinks the water, we don't know what happened with her. So if we're giving her the status of a vadai zaina is usher to kahuna also. So the Gemara says that couldn't be the pshat, because if that was true, you wouldn't need a pasuk to say that she's usher for Truma, because the Vadai Zaina is also usher for Truma, so that's not correct. So therefore, the Gemara says Rabbi Akiva has four psukim. It says Nitma three times, but one of them is Vinitma. So you have Nitma, 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 plus the Vav. Those are the four things: Baal, Bo, Truma, Kahuna. Now Rabbi Shmuel doesn't hold the extra Vav, and therefore he only has three limudim and needs a pasuk for Kahuna, and that's why he has the Kal V'chomer. So now the Gemara has a kash on the Kal V'chomer. Kal V'chomer is that kahuna is obviously, the Isser to marry kahuna is obviously more chamer than eating truma, because a grusha, a divorcee, is mutter to eat truma, but she's also for kahuna. So you see kahuna is more chamer. So then how do you know, says the Gemara, that the pasuk was talking about truma, and then kahuna is also kal v'chomer? If truma is also, kahuna is for sure also. Maybe the pasuk was talking about kahuna, and truma is really mutter. Why would I say that it's the easiest thing and then make a kal v'chomer? Maybe it's the more chamer thing, and you can't know the lighter thing. So my answer is it's logical that the pasuk is talking about truma, not kahuna, because the other things it's talking about are Baal and Boel. All those things are an issue that applies while the people involved are alive. The issue to marry kahuna only applies after they die. So that's not logical that what's included here is kahuna. What's logical is that what's included is something that's nogea while they're alive. So you have Baal, Bol, Truma, or nogea while they're alive. So kahuna then is something else. Now, Rabbi Akiva, why doesn't he hold of this Kal V'chomer? So there's two options. Either he doesn't hold of this, it has to be while it's alive, and therefore he learns that the pasuk is really talking about kahuna, not truma, and therefore you can't use the Kal V'chomer for kahuna. You have to say that the pasuk was talking about kahuna, and now truma you don't know, and that's why you need a fourth pasuk to tell me truma. Or you could say that Rabbi Akiva does hold of the Kal V'chomer, but he has a pasuk for it anyway. We have a rule sometimes something can be learned out of a Kal V'chomer, but we write a pasuk for it anyway. The Gemara now refers to a limud we had made recently. You can learn from Sotah that an object which is a suffix tumah, but it's just an object. It's not a person who could ask. It's just an object. So the object has a suffix tumah is sveikei tahar. It's always assumed to be tahar. You learned that out from Sotah, where the Sotah is the sveikei tamei. That's because it could ask. She's a person who asks, but an object is sveikei tahar. So now the Gemara says you don't have to learn that from there. You have two other psukim that show that same thing. The pasuk says v'habasar kol tahar yoichal, that tahar meat you could eat, and then in contrast to that, it says You cannot eat a tummy meat. So it's conflicting implication. What about if it's a suffix? It says tummy meat you can't eat, which implies that a suffix you could. It says tar meat you could eat, which implies that a suffix you can't. So obviously it's talking about that something which has the das lisha, something which is a person that could ask. There it would be sveikai tamei. Something which can't ask is sveikai tahar. So Gemara says, why do I need this drasha as well as the other drasha that you just brought from Sotah? So it says you need them both, because if you don't learn from Sotah, because you wouldn't know that there's a difference between Rishus HaYachid and Rishus HaRabim. Sotah, you see, if you would not learn from Sotah, you would not know that there's a difference between Rishus HaYachid and Rishus HaRabim. Sotah, you see that there's only a Cheskes Tumah in Rishus HaYachid, not in Rishus HaRabim. Now, if you'd only learn from these psukim, you would assume, if you would only learn from Sotah, if you wouldn't have anything else, you would assume that by Sotah, the only time that it's Sveikai Tamei is where both the Tamei and the Mitame could ask. That is, the Isha and the Boel both could ask. But if you have a situation where one of them can't, you would think of Sveikai Tahar. Kamash Malan, otherwise, you don't have to have the Boel and the Mitame and the Isha. It's enough if the thing which is a question of if it's becoming Tamei could ask. You don't have to have that. The thing that's Mitame, it is also able to ask. The Gemara now leaves the topic of Sotah for a while, and the Gemara goes into halachos of Tumah and the various levels of Tumah that there are. This was mentioned in our last Mishnah. So by way of introduction, there are many levels of Tumah. As each thing is Mitame something else, the power of the Tumah is decreasing and is less able to affect further things. So a source of Tumah, something which generates Tumah, is called an Av HaTumah. Something which gets Tumah from that is called a Rishon LaTumah. Something that gets from that is called a Sheni LaTumah, and then you could have a Shlishi, Revi, and sometimes even Chamishi LaTumah. Now, which types of items are susceptible for the weaker levels of Tumah? So general rule is the more Kedusha something has, the more susceptible it has to weaker Tumah, and it can even become Tamei from a weaker level of Tumah itself. So a Rishon Tumah is often something you could only find by people, kalim, or by food. A sheni you could often only find by food, even chulin. A shlishi you can often only find by truma. A shlishi revi you can often only find by kachim, and a chamishi would be paraduma mechatas, which has the highest level. Now we're going to discuss the levels of 3 and 4. What types of thing those types of shuma can affect. Now it's important to get a terminology straight here. When we say that something is tamei, we mean that it is tamei. It has halachas of having the characteristics of tumah. Generally, it's usher to eat, and it could also pass on tumah to something else. If we want to talk about something that is tamei but can't pass it further, the word is pasul. We say it's pasul, you can't eat it, but we don't call it tamei if it can't pass it further. So the Gemara is going to discuss a drasha that Rabbi Kiva had made. Rabbi Kiva had said that a sheni could make a shlishi tamei, which implies that the shlishi could pass tumah further. Now the Gemara is going to discuss it. We're talking about truma, we're talking about chulin, what are we talking about? But he learned from a klicheres, he had said a limud from psukim that a sheni can make a shlishi. So there's such a thing as a shlishi. Shlishi, which is tamei, can pass tumah further. So the Gemara then commented that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had said that our generation holds of that, and the later generations are not going to hold of that. So Gemara wants to know, our generation, which Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had said has no source for it, but we hold of it. So Gemara wants to know, if there's no source, why do we hold of it? And the Gemara is going to want to know, why is the later generation not going to hold of whatever reason that we hold of it? So the Gemara says that the source would be as follows. Here's the source for the halacha of a shlishi becoming tamei. And that's because we have a kavul chomer. We don't have a pasuk, but we have a kavul chomer. And that's what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai meant. And he said as follows. The kavul chomer is from comparing a tful yoim to a loaf of bread, which is a sheni l'tumah. Tful yoim is someone who was tamei, and his tumah ended, and he went to the mikvah. But now he has to wait for the sun to go down before he's fully tahar. So he's in a partial middle tumah level. So the halach of a tful yoim is that he can't be mitamei chulin. If he touches chulin, the chulin's fine. If he touches truma, he pasels it. Now, the halacha though of a piece of bread, which is a sheni l'tumah, is that it could pasel chulin. So you see that a piece of bread that's a sheni, so a sheni l'tuma is worse than a tful yom, because a tful yom doesn't passel chulin, but a sheni passels chulin. So Gemara therefore wants to say, so the sheni should be stronger than the tful yom. Now what is the halacha of tful yom on a shlishi for truma? So the tful yom can passel truma as a shlishi, so a sheni should make a shlishi even tamei. It should go a step further. Now Rashi discusses why there's no problem in this kalchamer of kenidan, but it's one step further. The tful yom could make it puzzle, could make truma a shlishi for puzzle, and the sheni, the kikar sheni, could be mitameit. So Mara says there's a pircha on this kal v'chaymer, and that tful yom is in av hatuma, and therefore maybe it's stronger, and that's why it could make truma into a shlishi tamei. But a sheni l'tuma is not an av hatuma; it's not a source, and therefore maybe it can't do that. So Mara says that's not a problem. We'll learn from a tful yom who's not an av hatuma. We'll learn from a tful yom who became tamei because he touched the sheretz. So Mara says no, it's still better because the tful yom who touched the sheretz is in a category of things that are in Av Hatoma, and that is, it's the same category as a person who touched the mace. A person who touched the mace himself becomes an Av Hatoma. So therefore, it's a category of things that should still be stronger than a Kikar Sheni. Someone says no, because you could also learn from a Kli Cheres. A Kli Cheres can never be in Av Hatoma, and there's nothing in its category that's an Av Hatoma. Kli Cheres, even if it touches a mace, does not become an Av Hatoma. And yet, a Kli Cheres could still be Mitame. So you see, it has nothing to do with the fact that its category has an Av Hatoma in it. So Mara says no, because Kli Cheres has a different reason that it's strong, and that's because the Kli Cheres could be Matame something without touching it. Anything that's in its airspace is Matame. So the Mara says, all right, so you have two different chumras over here.